I do something called men's work with an organization called the Mankind Project. And it's not the only organization that does that kind of work, and there are many different ways that men can engage the questions that we do in that organization. But one of the things that we invite men to do in men's work is something called a check-in. It's a fairly simple step, but in the moment that you do it, you break the man box in several fundamental ways. But I'm going to just model a check-in, and Mark's going to do one as well. And if anybody else would like to take a shot at it from the audience, you're welcome to do so. We'll bring you a microphone and you can do it. Just be aware that your entire family is watching on this stream. So, but when I do a check-in, this is what I do. I say, well, I'm sort of, I'm excited. I'm excited to be in a conversation. Underneath that, I have some tension about, you know, how I'm going to go forward through this process and make people feel involved and engaged. Underneath that, I have this freaking river of sadness because we lost someone very dear to me and my family about 3 weeks ago, which has impacted everyone in my circle, in my home, and which has reminded me of the death of my father in 2015, which I was present for, and which I realized I spoke about the events of caring for him in the last weeks of his life. And anyone who's cared for someone who's dying understands the degree of the physical nature of that. But I never wept that story. And here we are talking about crying again, which just curdles a lot of people's milk. I don't know why when we talk about men being emotional, we have to talk about crying. But in the case of grief, that's the way you move it out. I called my friend Boysen 6 days ago, and we did a FaceTime, and I wept that story, the details of my father's last days, both his beautiful ability to connect even just, 2 days before he died, but also his shame and grief at having to put this burden on other people to take care of him through this process. So that's my check-in. I got this river flowing, which I'm mindful of, and which on one level I'm grateful for, and the other level I'm exhausted by. And then I have the joy and excitement of this conversation.
So my check-in, I think what I'm feeling in this moment is fear borderlining on terror. Because
I love that. I love that.
Because these kinds of conversations are not natural for me. I grew up in a very, very private family, and we would have conversations like this perhaps amongst ourselves, but we would never have it outside the family. And oh God, my heart is racing. And I'm married into a family that is even more private than mine. And I find myself in a room with people that I know and I'm going to have to face afterwards, saying things, revealing things that I don't believe I would have done otherwise. So I'm feeling very, like a little bit naked, and hoping that it goes well here, because that this is a helpful experience for everybody, and for me.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. You're not alone in those feelings. I want to just note something that you witnessed in those moments, and that is that Mark and I are not simply expressing our emotions. We are moving emotion back and forth between us. And it is in that process of co-creating our emotions, both in terms of supporting each other, but also deeply appreciating knowing what's going on for each other, that moves us out of the man box construct and into a much more lateral, connecting version of masculinity, a masculinity of connection, a healthy masculinity of connection, where I see Mark, I see some of you in a way which later I'll feel like I know that man, and if I need his help, I know he'll understand. I know he'll understand why I need that help.
Right.
And that's the thing I believe that these young boys in Niobe Way's books knew and understood. And that's what gets stripped away from us in this competitive hierarchical masculinity that we have to pass through if we're to be considered successful men.